With the new KSP2 for Science update, many have speculated what the upper limit is of the first tier of the tech tree. In fact, Nate Simpson himself threw down this gauntlet.
I suspect we're going to see someone like Matt Lown flying to Eeloo with this tech level.
Now, last time I checked, I am Matt Lown, and so I couldn't not oblige Nate's suspicions. But I'm not going to go to Eeloo with just the tech from Tier 1. I'm going to go to Eeloo and return with just the tech from Node 1. This will be my space agency's first ever mission, with no tech unlocked. So all we have are these parts: a tiny capsule and parachute, a decoupler, a swivel engine, and a tiny fuel tank, and a pointless wing and tinier fuel tank. And crucially, there's no means of generating electricity, and there's no heat shield either. Nevertheless, I remained confident that it could indeed be done, so I wasted no time at all heading off to the vehicle assembly building and slapping together the rocket you can see taking shape on your screens. And you know what, despite the magnitude of this challenge, I don't think it looks that oversized or absurd, but I guess you guys have to be the judge of that, don't you? But with its completion, all that was left to do was to slap together an epic-looking paint scheme, and then it was time to head to the tracking station. Once there, I maxed out the time warp and waited until we got to the transfer window needed, which is, of course, to Eve. Interesting. I'll talk about this a bit more later, but for those who don't know, the transfer window to Eve is that if you draw a line from Kerbin to the sun to Eve, Eve needs to be 55 degrees behind Kerbin. But that was it, that was everything ready and prepared, so there's nothing else left to do except, launch. And just like that, Expert Mode Aerospace launches its first ever rocket. As you can see, I took inspiration from the SLS here by having an orange first stage and a bit of white on the second stage. And that's pretty much where the similarities end. I mean, I guess it's not really similar. It doesn't look like the SLS, does it? But, I am pretty proud of how it turned out. Part of me was kind of apprehensive that it would end up being this massive, spindly, gigantic, ridiculous-looking rocket, given that we only have very limited tech. But I think, all things considered, yes, it does look dumb, but it doesn't look absurd and doesn't look like completely out of the realm of possibility. Like, look at the UR700. This doesn't look that detached from that. Add some nose cones to those flat surfaces, and I'd say this is a pretty good-looking machine. There goes the first stage, although I guess it's kind of the first 4 stages, right? I mean, there were 4 boosters in stage 1, so whatever. And now we're on to the second stage. Now, some of you might be thinking, Matt, there's not a lot of rocket left at this point, and we haven't even made it to low Kerbin orbit yet. How on earth are you going to get to Eeloo? Because going to Eeloo requires about 8,000 to 9,000 meters per second of delta V when all is said and done. And to that end, I say, well, that's okay, because I'll be using the new cheat menu that was added in For Science. That's right, we're going to be using cheats. Nah, we're not. I don't know how to segue out of that little joke that I've just told, and I think calling it a joke is also a bit of a stretch. We are, of course, going to be making use of gravity assists, which is why this video is 7 centuries long. So this is a good time to mention that if you don't fancy sticking around for the best part of an hour, I did make a companion video for this video. It's like 5 minutes long. It's a nice snappy music video. There's a link in the description. If you're on my Patreon, you've already seen it because I released it early for Patreon members. And, this is an unmonetized video as well, so it's not going to help me by watching it because it's unlisted. I used copyrighted music. I used the National Express by the Divine Comedy, so they get all the royalties for the ads. So there'll be an ad on the video. I didn't put it there. YouTube put it there. I really liked it, actually. I was really proud of that video. So there you go. There's a little ad for that. If this video is a little bit too long for your tastes, then you know what? That's too bad. I wanted to give the viewers an idea of what Jebediah Kerman is about to go through. It's going to be a very, very long time spent in that tiny capsule of his. Although he's got an iPad, it's still going to be a long old time. And I don't think iPad batteries last that long. And I didn't give him a charger. So, I mean, if it's not dead by now, it's probably going to be dead soon. But I didn't give him a charger for a very good reason. As you can see, we don't have batteries unlocked at this stage. We haven't got solar panels or fuel cells or RTGs or anything else unlocked. So the only electric charge we have is 50 units of electricity in that command pod, which is not going to last very long. Now, luckily, we have some ways of mitigating against this. Firstly, for most of the time I'll spend time warping in this mission, I'll have SAS disabled. Then we won't be using any electric charge whatsoever. The only time that we'll be consuming power is when we're running the reaction wheels, like now. Don't ask me how the life support systems work on this rocket. Probably doesn't have any. The other saving grace is that the swivel engine, which is the engine that's powering this beast, has an alternator inside it. So whenever the engine is firing, as you can see in the top right, it recharges the command pod's batteries. So while I went into this mission a little bit apprehensive because I really didn't know how much of a limiting factor power consumption would be, as it turns out, it's actually trivially easy to avoid running out of electricity. We just turn off SAS whenever we're doing time warp. You'll notice I do forget to do this a couple of times, and we don't lose that much electric charge, to be fair. So if for some reason you decide to do this, which I probably would recommend against, there are more fun things you can do in KSP2. It's not the end of the world if you forget every now and then. Just make liberal use of F5 and F9. Now, at this point in the mission, I thought I would take the opportunity to complete some science contracts. We can start earning some science points. No real reason, I guess, because I only made this save so I could do this one mission. I don't plan on continuing this save file after this. But I thought a fun part of this mission would be to see how far along the tech tree would I get in just this one launch. I was thinking maybe we could get about, I don't know, half of tier 1, because we're not going to be able to do that many contracts, right? Like, we could do the initial ones like launch a rocket, orbit Kerbid, go on EVA, but then the next few contracts are things like visit the Mun and stuff like that, and we're not doing that. We're going to Eeloo. So I wasn't sure how much science we'd get. So maybe this is a fun thing we could do right now. Comment below in the comment section. I mean, where else would you comment, right? Comment below in the comment section how far along you think in the tech tree I'll get at the end of this mission. And then at the end of the mission, we'll see. And maybe you could edit your comment and say, hey, I was right, or I was wrong, or wow, this is a great video, Matt. I'm going to press the like button. And I've also made sure that I've hit subscribe and I've rung the bell because I really like the content that you make. And I'd love to get notified whenever you make content, which, by the way, guys, is every Monday for Space News, every Saturday, usually for Kerbal Space Program 1 and 2. But I guess for the foreseeable future, it's going to be a lot of KSP2 content because now the game is that. It's a game with missions. And yet here I am, still doing my own arbitrary thing, right? I am definitely going to do a playthrough of exploration mode. I wasn't really sure how to do it though, because I could do it like this, where I try and unlock as much as possible in the first launch. I try and do the entire thing in like 3 missions or something, which would be a fun challenge to do, right? But then, I don't know. On the other hand, I'm thinking maybe it might be more fun to play the game, I'm doing the air quotes thing now, correctly, like as the developers intended. So the first launch, you just go to 10 kilometers and back down, don't go to orbit. Second launch, you go to orbit and kind of play through like that, which is how I played the game when I first got the 4 Science update, just to kind of see how it's supposed to be played by normal players. I don't know if that sounds cocky and arrogant. I'm sorry if it does. I think that might be a more fun to play, because it's more like then you can play along with me, like a let's play. If you're struggling at a specific point in the campaign mode, then you can fire up whichever episode in my let's play series. So I am genuinely looking for some feedback here. Which would you prefer? Ultimately, I am going to do both. This will probably be episode 1 of me trying to unlock the tech tree in as few launches as possible, but it'll be interesting to hear what you guys think. Now, I realized that whilst I was kind of talking about all of that, I didn't talk about the big thing I just did, which was an Eve gravity assist. And I've just set up another gravity assist on that maneuver plan that is going to slingshot us past Kerbin. Because as I mentioned way back at the beginning of this video, this is quite a small vessel. At the moment, we've only got about 4 kilometers per second of delta V remaining, which is really nowhere near enough to do an Eeloo return. So I'm going to be saving as much fuel as physically possible by doing lots of gravity assists. So by using an Eve gravity assist followed by 2 Kerbin gravity assists, we can get all the way to Jool with a fraction of the fuel it would normally take if we were just going there directly from low Kerbin orbit. And then when we're at Jool, we're going to use the green planet's massive gravity well to fling us all the way out to Eeloo for basically nothing. And that is how this mission is going to be done. Now, it's probably possible, I mean, it's almost certainly possible to do this mission without doing this and just doing it directly, but that would require a gigantic rocket, and I don't know, I just wanted to like have the opportunity to try out doing gravity assists, because I've done this a lot in KSP1, but it is substantially harder to do in KSP2. Now, any KSP2 developers who might be watching this video, please get a pen out and write this down. We need the next orbit button back. So, in Kerbal Space Program 1, if you made a maneuver node, most of you would know how that works, but a lot of people might not know there's a little button on the maneuver node maker that lets you skip orbit. So the maneuver node like line prediction will show you what will happen when you do the burn in more than one orbit time. So for example, if you make a maneuver node out to say, you know, from LKO to the Mun, and you don't get a Mun encounter, rather than moving the maneuver node around, which would make sense in this context, you can press the skip orbit button and keep pressing that button until the orbits are such that you'll encounter the Mun. I hope that makes sense. Weird example, because why would you do that from LKO to the Mun? But when we're talking about gravity assists, it is an invaluable tool, because you can't always get the right gravity assist on the first orbit. You have to wait a couple of orbits before you can get the optimal encounter, so it makes it really, really easy for planning multiple gravity assists in advance. So I could plan an Eve gravity assist, make another maneuver node on the resultant orbit, and skip orbit a few times to get the Kerbin one planned out, and then on that maneuver node, I can make another maneuver node and skip around a bit to get my dual encounter, and then I can fine-tune all of the maneuver nodes on every level and change in the orbits, so I can plan out the entire trip all in one go. You can't do that in KSP2 because there's no skip orbit button, and like the patch conic system, like the number of steps ahead you can see in your orbit after each subsequent sphere of influence change, it doesn't go as far as KSP1. And I tried changing this in the game settings, it didn't seem to work, so perhaps this was a glitch or I just didn't do something properly. Either way, because of the fact we don't have the skip orbit button, it's going to make gravity assists a lot more just trial and error. So I would just do a gravity assist and then just see what happened. And if I couldn't get an encounter with the next planet I needed to encounter, I would just max out Time Warp and just wait for a bit, and then make another maneuver node and see what happened there. So this mission is artificially elongated because of this. I think it took like 55 years, I could be making this up, it was a long time basically in Kerbal years for this mission to complete, and the big reason for this was because it was basically impossible to plan future gravity assists in advance. I just had to do each gravity assist one at a time and then try and force a gravity assist with the resultant orbit. Luckily it generally worked out fairly okay. I mean, Jebediah meant he had to spend a few more years than was potentially necessary in his tiny command pod. The only time this became really annoying was trying to get back to Kerbin. I did an Eve gravity assist to get back to Kerbin and I just couldn't get it to work, and then I had to load a quick save years and years ago and do the Kerbin gravity. It was a nightmare. There's a lot of stuff edited out of this video. I think I had like 4.5 hours of footage in total, so I squished it down as much as possible. So I deleted any maneuver node that I made that I didn't end up executing, and any time I quick saved and then subsequently messed something up and had to quick load, I cut out that little bit. I'm pretty sure that there are no continuity errors because of this, but there might be odd occasions where suddenly a maneuver node just appears and you didn't see me make it. That's because I didn't end up doing it and I just deleted it, and I wanted this video to kind of be as short as possible, and I did a brilliant job. As you can see, it's still got a massive runtime, but whenever I do big long videos, people seem to respond pretty well to them, so I guess you're welcome. I don't know. Anyway, now we're doing the biggest gravity assist of them all, as in the gravity assist that uses the biggest gravity well. That is our dual gravity assist. Great wording there. Just wait for it. Looking at the map screen. Boom. Look at how much our orbit can change with dual. And for our Eeloo capture to be as efficient as possible, basically we want our orbit prior to entering Eeloo's sphere of influence to be as close as possible to what Eeloo's orbit around the sun is, because then we have to do less change in velocity to match Eeloo's orbit, which is essentially what you're doing when you're capturing around a celestial body. But yeah, they are difficult to pull off, but my goodness, it is satisfying when you get gravity assists to work the way you want them to. They are kind of a confusing concept, right? They even sound possibly like they're a little bit cheating, but they are a real thing in real life. NASA uses them all the time, a famous example being the Voyager probes used what they called a grand tour of the solar system to get as much energy as possible from the planets and slingshotting around the whole solar system to go on an escape velocity from the sun. But it does seem a bit weird, right? Like, it kind of breaks physics because the spacecraft is basically getting energy for nothing, right? And it doesn't even seem to make sense logically, because you're falling down towards the planet, so you're gaining speed, but then when you pass it, you'll be moving away from the planet and losing speed. So surely the net amount of energy gained is 0, because you can't make or destroy energy, right? So where is all of this extra velocity coming from? And that is a good question, and it does have a logical answer. We aren't getting energy for nothing. There is a place that this energy is coming from. Well, I guess in real life. I think in KSP it is energy for nothing because it's too complicated to calculate where it's actually coming from. Because where it actually comes from is the planet that you're passing. So in the example of, let's say, Jupiter, in the real life example, because that's the closest analog to Joule, if a spacecraft were to do a gravity assist off Jupiter, it gains velocity by taking some of Jupiter's energy from its orbit around the sun. So technically, when the Voyager spacecraft passed one of the gas giants, it actually changed the gas giant's orbit very slightly. Now obviously, the mass of Jupiter versus the mass of the Voyager spacecraft is unfathomably large, to the point where basically Jupiter's orbit wouldn't have changed, right? Like, we're talking like less than an atom probably. I don't know what the exact measurement is, so don't quote me on that, but it's basically completely unmeasurably small, to the point where NASA doesn't even take it into consideration when doing gravity assists, obviously. But that's where it's coming from. We're technically stealing some of the orbital energy from whichever planet we're passing. And I'm sorry if you're an astrophysicist watching, probably rolling your eyes, because that was a massively oversimplified explanation and probably wasn't completely factually accurate, but hey, this is just a silly Kerbal Space Program 2 video. Never pretended it was going to be some in-depth lecture on astrophysics. I'm just explaining it here, just in case it's confusing, because I'm going to admit, when I first heard about gravity assists, I was a little bit confused by them as well. But it's not energy for nothing, it is coming from somewhere. Again, in real life. In KSP, pretty sure the planets are all just on rails. Well, I know the planets are all on rails. But look at that, we are now suspended above the massive Joule planet. I know Joule seems big in KSP, because it is, but did you know it's about the same size as Earth in real life? To give you a sense of just how small Kerbal scale is compared to real life scale. At this point, Jebediah's been in his capsule for 35 years, nearly 36 years, so I thought he might want to just stretch his legs out a bit. Then I realised you can plant a flag on the vessel, which is quite funny. Obviously that's a bit of a glitch and there was no actual, visual flag planted, but they played the animation anyway. Thought that was kind of cute. Another cute thing I found out, actually, use this information however you want, but if you're in low orbit of a planet or moon, you can actually get your Kerbal on the exterior of your spacecraft like I just did using the magnetic boots, and then you can actually collect a surface sample, because I guess the game sees that your Kerbal is standing, not like using jetpack, and can see whichever biome you're over, and will just assume that the Kerbal is standing on the planet. I guess it was a bit of an oversight from the developers that Kerbals can also just get out and stand on spacecraft above the surface. However, that was just a cute little bug, so I imagine that'll get patched out soon, but that's just something I saw pop up on the KSP subreddit, which I love little glitches like that. It really gives a little insight into how the game is coded, and it doesn't break anything or kill anyone's enjoyment, so it's an alright bug as far as bugs go, I say. Going back to the subject of gravity assists though, just quickly. Obviously at the moment I've been using gravity assists to gain orbital velocity, but gravity assists also work the other way around, so we can actually use them to decelerate, which is going to be an absolute lifesaver, because if you remember at the beginning of this video, in addition to having very few parts and no electrical generating parts and no batteries, we also have no heat shields. And obviously we now have re-entry heating to worry about in KSP2. And yes, I do have a re-entry heating enabled on this playthrough, and it's I don't know if you can change the value of re-entry heating like you could in KSP1, I'm not sure, but I've left it at whatever default value it was. And it's pretty brutal. I tried just re-entering from directly just to see what happened, and the spacecraft exploded pretty much immediately. So I'll have to be doing lots and lots of gravity assists to decelerate as much as possible before our final Kerbin re-entry. And even then, it was a little bit sketchy. So there's a little reminder to stick around, watch the full video, etc, etc. In fact, to give you a sense of just how long the deceleration process took, I mean, we're almost not even at the halfway point, and look at this. We have our Eeloo encounter. I wanted to fine-tune it a bit, get the periapsis a little bit lower, but that's a pretty good Eeloo encounter all set up. One of the best examples in Kerbal Space Program about the practicality of doing gravity assists to decelerate is getting captures around Jool. The biggest and most massive moon of Jool is of course Tylo. Tylo has a massive gravity well, it's essentially the same as Kerbin's, and so you can actually use Tylo to give you a gravity assist to get you captured in an orbit around Jool without any engine burning whatsoever. That's probably the most common use of gravity assist decelerations that people do in Kerbal Space Program, or at least it's probably the most frequent one that I make use of anyway. And wait for it, here we are, entering Eelu's sphere of influence. That's right, our space agency's first ever mission with, of course, basically no technology is we've gone to the furthest planet away from the sun. And you know, gotta flex on that background art, right? If you look at the tech tree in the background of each tier, so there are 4 tiers at the moment as of me making this video. I'm recording this commentary on the 3rd of January 2024. The background art shows you where the game expects you to go with each tier of technology. So the first tier, that's kind of Kerbin, Minmus, Mun. Second tier is Juno and stuff like that. Third tier is the Jool moons and Jool and Dres. And then the 4th tier is where Eelu comes in. So here we go. We don't even need tier 1. Just the first node, you can get to Eelu. I wouldn't, again, recommend doing this. This is dumb. But hey, if you want to get practice doing gravity assists, again, don't do this. This is dumb. I mean, it's a common question I get on videos like this. Like, I've done a few big, epic missions that require lots of gravity assists. And I guess one of the most frequent questions is, Matt, how can I get notified of when you make videos? And I would say, press subscribe and ring the bell. I've already done this gag. But no, in all seriousness, the most frequent question I get is, how do I gravity assist? How do you gravity assist? How do we gravity assist? And I don't really have a straight answer for you in terms of getting better at gravity assists. A lot of people have asked me to make tutorials, and I don't know how to explain it. You just have to practice. And I know that's like the whole get good when it comes to getting better at Dark Souls and stuff. But get good is a legitimate piece of advice, you know. Gravity assists are one of those things where the way I was self-taught, I just basically made maneuver plans and then just made them extend past planets and moons, see how that affected my trajectory, and eventually just did it so much that I got good, basically. That's my advice, which I can elaborate more on this in a bit. But first I want to address that we've just landed on Eelu. Yes, my space agency's first ever landing. We didn't even do a landing on Kerbin before this. So by golly, I hope the parachute on this vessel works, because this is an untested technology. The game there on the research tab giving me clear instructions to go outside in all caps. I don't know if this is advice to do in the game, or the game has just seen what I've done on this mission and says, crikey, you should maybe go out and touch grass, Matt. Either way, I took it personally, but not wanting to be deterred, I pressed on anyway. We have taken a surface sample, which is going to net us, oh my gosh, 3,600 science points. So was that in line with what you guys were thinking? I've only done like a couple of 4 science missions in KSP2 at this point, so I haven't done that much surface sample gathering, and I guess I just didn't realize how much science you get. Or maybe the science multiplier for Eelu is just very, very high. It was very high in KSP1. And that was an annoying thing in KSP1 that I kind of hope has been fixed in KSP2. Not Eelu, but the way the science multipliers worked when it came to gathering surface samples and doing science experiments, etc., etc., it basically based it on how far away you were from Kerbin. So, for example, Minmus, much easier moon to land on than the Mun, but you got more science for Minmus because it was further away from Kerbin. Likewise, Eelu, you got a lot more science than landing on, say, Tylo, even though Tylo is much, much harder to land on, in my opinion, and you get less science for doing a return from Eve, the final boss of Kerbal Space Program. So I haven't actually looked into this or looked it up at all, so I don't know if this is the case, but is this the case in KSP2, or have the developers fixed it so that the amount of science returns you get is more properly aligned with how difficult your destination was? So in my opinion, returning surface samples from Eve should net you the highest science, right? Is that the case in KSP2? I don't know. I'm looking forward to experimenting with this after I finish recording this video, but maybe you guys can let me know in the comment section below. And hey, you know, we're 25 minutes in. If you are enjoying the video so far, a like is always very much appreciated, so helps me out in that way. And here we are, circularizing back into Eeloo orbit with 2 kilometers per second of Delta V remaining, so plenty of fuel to get home. But I was being very, very stingy with my fuel reserves because at this point, I really wasn't sure how much of a threat re-entry heating was going to be. Maybe, you know, in retrospect, this is probably quite foolhardy of me, but I didn't do any experimentation with how well ships stand up to re-entry coming from interplanetary velocities in this game without heat shields, because I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. If I can't re-enter, we live and learn, right? Fun video. Maybe I can put in a gag somewhere of, like, you know, me crying in the shower and drinking whiskey. I don't even have that shower anymore. You know, that shower has a seat in it. Because I bought this house, my house, it used to be owned by an old person, and so they had loads of mobility stuff, like a seat in the shower and stuff. Like, I got a nice shower now, it's grey, because I'm a millennial, and we decorate all our houses with it's just grey. Everything is grey now. My cat is grey, and, well, actually, not true. One of my cats is grey. That's right, guys, the big news that we got a new kitten. It's another British Shorthair, but a golden one this time. He's called Whiskey. So this segues earlier to the whiskey in the shower. We have a new kitten. He's called Whiskey. I've got to pay the kitten tax. There he is on screen. He's 13 weeks old. We picked him up a couple of days ago. Oh, ain't he precious. He's having to live separately from Hurricane at the moment because, you know, cats, they're territorial. But Hurricane seems very interested in him, so it's going very well. So yeah, that's our new thing. There's Whiskey. Any precious. Anyway, back to, you know, the video at hand. We have now left Eeloo's sphere of influence and are now beginning the journey, the long and arduous journey back to Kerbin. And it's going to be a dangerous one, as I said earlier. Re-entry heating is pretty brutal in this game. I don't know if it's harder, or like, not harder, but like harsher than it was in KSP1, or if it's about the same. Haven't experimented enough with it yet, but it was very difficult for this mission. But that's we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here. First things first, you can see me here setting up a dual gravity assist. This is going to change our periapsis around Kerbol to be about the same level as Kerbin's orbital height. However, it was not sufficient. I'm zoomed in at the moment, but if we zoom out, well, yeah, eventually you'll see me zoom out. It was not sufficient to get my periapsis low enough. So in addition to doing a dual gravity assist, we're going to enhance it by doing a lathe gravity assist as well. Lathe's gravity well isn't as big as Tylo's, but it's not that far off, so it's also very, very good for performing gravity slingshot maneuvers like we're doing here. And there you go, you can see my periapsis is pretty low at this point. It's still above Juno, so we're going to have to do a bit of refinement, which is what we're going to do in stages. I found that the maneuver planner is still not quite accurate enough to plan everything precisely, and then executing the burn, what you end up with is never quite the same as what the maneuver planner predicted. And for something that requires such finesse as what we're doing here, I find it's easier to do the burns in stages, getting our orbit closer and closer to the desired level until eventually we can kind of get there. The smaller the burn required, the more accurate it ends up being. So I do lots of velocity change at first using big burns, and then we refine things right at the very end with a smaller burn. I hope that made sense. And in this mission's case, I couldn't get the maneuver planner to be accurate when outside of Joule's sphere of influence because the delta V numbers required were so small that even just like the tiniest drag on one of the maneuver planner nodes ended up making the orbit massively different. So by planning the maneuver within Joule's sphere of influence, okay, it's going to cost us a bit more delta V, but that means that it's not quite as fiddly when it comes to planning the maneuver itself. Another reason I wasn't too worried about this was because I knew deep down we still had plenty of delta V to get home, like 1,464 meters per second of delta V at this current stage, which is plenty delta V to get home. But at the same time, I was still trying to be kind of conservative here because I really wasn't sure how much of a threat re-entry heating was going to be at Kerbin. And, well, spoiler alert, it was harsher than I was expecting, but we'll get to that when we get there. Here you can see me continuing to refine my orbit past Joule and Lathe to get the optimal gravity assist. And again, you'll see me doing this over several small burns. Look at this one, 3 delta V required, so I really whacked the thrust limiter of the swivel engine right down. But yeah, that's that. But how have you guys been? You know, I feel like we've not really had a proper conversation. I made this joke a lot, right? Because this isn't a conversation, is it? It's just me talking into a microphone for 29 minutes, nearly 30 minutes now. How time does fly when you're having fun, eh? I hope. But yeah, obviously, you know, this is my first video. No, it's not my first video of 2024, is it? I did a space this week on New Year's Day. What a trooper. But that was like space this week, which is all a lot more scripted, a lot more like, hey, here's the news. Not as conversational, not as rambly, not as interpersonal as these Kerbal Space Program videos tend to be. They're kind of like, the most rambly ones are of course my Planet Coaster videos, but nobody watched those. I'd love to make more Planet Coaster videos. Everyone keeps on saying, hey, can you play Planet Coaster again? It was really fun. I loved making Planet Coaster videos, but the truth is no one really watched them, and it did actually really negatively affect my standing in the YouTube algorithm, because YouTube's algorithm, I guess, can't distinguish. So I think it classifies Kerbal Space Program as a strategy game, right? And I think it classifies Planet Coaster as a strategy game as well. So although it can see that it's two different games, they are both strategy games. And when I have a series like KSP where I'm getting like 80 to 100,000 views per video, but then another series of a strategy game with like, you know, 10,000 views per video, the algorithm gets confused and in the end doesn't actually like give me any views. It doesn't. My views went way down when I was doing Adventure Woods, and things like sponsors don't really like they feel a bit more nervous working with me. Like, we just looked at your last 5 videos and like sometimes we only get like 5,000 views. So how can you guarantee us this many? I'm like, well, basically no one watches those ones, so why are you making those videos? Well, that's a good question, actually. And so I wrapped up Adventure Woods as quickly as possible. Like, I think Velocity Lake had about 70 or so episodes, whereas Adventure Woods, I think, finished before it even hit episode 15, because I tried to make the episodes... Basically, I did Adventure Woods for me. I just wanted to play Planet Coaster again. So I made the episodes longer and tried to sort of get them more compact, if that makes sense, like a bit more content dense, so I could make fewer episodes in total. And the final episode of Adventure Woods aligned perfectly with the release of KSP2. And obviously we know how KSP2 was when it first came out. It took a lot longer to make Kerbal Space Program videos, given the state of the game. It took, like, you know, a trivially easy mission, like a Mun return, not even Apollo style, like a direct ascent Mun mission, suddenly was very, very, very difficult because of the sheer quantity of game-breaking bugs that would occur. So it was kind of good timing that I would cut off one of my weekly series. And, you know, I haven't really felt a desire to go back. I don't know, I feel like I've done my thing. I've done everything I want to do in Planet Coaster now. Like, Adventure Woods was really nice. It was a nice, quaint, realistic scale, small scale theme park. Velocity Lake was my big attempt at a, not Disneyland, more of like an Alton Towers type park. I realize now I'm saying all of this. This doesn't, like, probably like none of you actually relate to any of this, because statistically very small number of you actually watch these episodes. I feel like I'm complaining about that, by the way. I'm not complaining. You obviously subscribe to my channel for either KSP or Space News. I wouldn't expect you to watch Planet Coaster. I do this as well. I subscribe to a channel, but I don't really watch like a lot of the episodes they do. Like, I'm really sorry to say this, but I subscribe to Second Wind. I only watch Fully Ramblematic though, sorry about that. But yeah, so I do not hold any grudges, I'm just saying, you know, not many people watched it statistically, so I don't know why I'm dedicating so much time in this commentary to Planet Coaster, basically. But feels good, feels nostalgic to be talking about roller coasters again on this channel. And, well, that's all I have to say about that, really. Wow, I mean, how did I even get onto this tangent, right? I think I was talking about, oh, it was Christmas, it was the New Year, and then I started getting all nostalgic about Adventure Woods, I suppose. But there wasn't really much else to talk about, right? I've talked about our new kitten, it's the new year. I don't know if there's anything else to really discuss. My house is all done. That was a big, it was probably a big part of my commentaries in, like, I don't know, October, November, December. My house has been undergoing massive amounts of renovations, but it's all finally done. The carpenters left a few weeks ago. All the furniture is done and built. Oh, that's a lie. We've got the final thing is coming in 2 days, I think. 2 days? 3 days? Something like that. We've got a new sofa coming for our rear bedroom, because the rear bedroom, it's just me and Beth and the cats, right? So we don't need a bed in the rear bedroom. So we're getting a sofa bed, so it can just be a sofa, right? You guys know what a sofa bed is for most of the time, because we can chill there. There's a PC in there. Cat stuff's in there. We play the cats in there. It's basically the cat's bedroom. I don't like admitting it, but it feels weird to say, like, this is our bedroom and this is Hurricane's bedroom. It feels weird to have a cat to have his own double bedroom, but there we go, I suppose. Anyway, as you can see, oh my gosh, Matt's looked back at the screen. He's going to talk about the gameplay again. We have a Kerbin encounter for the first of our big gravity. Well, I suppose we've done one with Jewel and Layth, right? But now we're doing gravity assists with Kerbin and Eve. We're basically doing a reversal of the process we took to get to Jewel. We're going to do 2 Kerbin gravity assists, followed by an Eve gravity assist, and that should slow down our velocity enough that we can survive re-entry, hopefully just about. Now, I did actually try, I made a quick save here, and then lowered my periapsis around Kerbin to intersect its atmosphere, just to see if I could survive, because although we don't have a proper heat shield on this craft, we do kind of have a heat shield in the form of all those fuel tanks and the engine. They'll kind of be like sacrificial parts to protect the command pod from heating, but it didn't work. We exploded pretty much immediately upon touching the atmosphere. So it was my fears were realized. I wasn't done just yet. I was gonna have to play the game for another couple of hours to decelerate around the sun using, again, Kerbin and Eve so that we can safely re-enter. And the word safely in that sentence is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It wasn't really a safe re-entry. I did have to end up using those lower parts of the rocket as sacrificial pieces to, help make sure the command pod survived. But again, I'm spoiling the video again in advance. But I suppose you guys would probably have figured that I get back safely because I wouldn't have made this video otherwise. Although maybe I would have, and I would have done that gag I talked about earlier of me crying in my not shower and drinking whiskey, etc., etc. Anyway, the first of our Kerbin encounters is done. Now we're going for our second one, which is going to get us an apoapsis around the sun, sort of between Kerbin and Juna, and then it's going to get us on a nice intersect with Eve, and then Eve is going to lower us such that we can encounter Kerbin. The objective of the Eve gravity assist will be that once we leave Eve's sphere of influence, wow, that was a really hard sentence to say, our apoapsis around Kerbol should just intersect with Kerbin's orbit. You don't want to be crossing Kerbin's orbital line at a big angle or anything, because that's going to increase the amount of delta V you need to circularize, which, when it comes to surviving re-entry, we want to be as low as possible. But yeah, I hope you can see that the amount of finagling I've had to do with doing very, very small burns and making very, very small maneuver nodes. You can see just how precise you need to be when planning maneuver nodes, or planning gravity assists, I should say, like this. So it'd be really nice if, as mentioned earlier, it'd be really nice if we could get that skip orbit button back to the maneuver node maker that we had in KSP1, but also we could have that precise maneuver node adjuster. I don't know what the tool is called, but where you could scroll on the maneuver node maker nodes so you could have more precise adjustments, and you had that thing in the bottom left so you could do more, I don't know what it was called, the maneuver node planner thing. It'd be nice if we could have something like that as well, because it really is super fiddly having to try and click and drag. Like, I've got a Logitech mouse that I guess is for first person shooters, because there's a button that lets you toggle super low DPI on the mouse, so I guess it's designed for first person shooters, right? Like when you're sniping, so you can hold down the button and do really precise aiming, but it's really useful in KSP when I do a very, very slight drag on the maneuver node planner's node. I just hold down that button and do an adjustment, but really it'd be nice if we didn't have to do that, if there was some sort of inbuilt precise node maneuver maker tool. Hopefully it'll get added eventually. I mean, I don't know how we're going to do interstellar maneuvers with the current maneuver planner unless they're saving something. I mean, we've already got that last notch on the time warp bar at the bottom. That's still grayed out, and I'm convinced that's to allow you to just accelerate through interstellar distances, which are mind-bogglingly, incomprehensibly large compared to what we've been doing in the game thus far. So I'm guessing that's what that final grayed out time warp button is for. So maybe when that becomes available, there'll be another kind of more precise maneuver planner as well. Or will the game just automatically plot the maneuvers for you for Interstellar because it's way beyond the realm of human accuracy? I'm really, really curious to see how they implement Interstellar. I don't know if I'm misremembering, but I'm fairly sure in one of the KSP preview videos, before KSP2 released, there was some mention of sub-millimeter precision when it came to doing interstellar distances, which is big if true. Well, actually it's small if true, technically speaking. That was awful. Either way though, Interstellar, very, 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 very excited to see what comes with that. It's a long way away, I concede. I'm more excited, to be honest, for the colonies. That's going to be really, really exciting, especially for having the automated routes. For those that don't know, colonies will be dependent on you supplying them with things. This is my understanding of it anyway. So say I'm making all of this up now because I don't know what resources will be required, but say a colony needs lithium, but the colony is on the Mun, and the Mun doesn't really have any good lithium deposits, but Minmus does. So you can build some sort of cargo vessel that leaves the Mun, lands on Minmus, mines the lithium or whatever, and then goes back to the Mun and deposits the lithium at the landing site of your colony. And then once you've established you can do it once, it's a bit like that KSP esports event that me and Beardy Penguin won, where once you've proven you can do it, you can then just set it to automatically keep repeating itself. And that's how the game will work. It will just keep running that automated route once you've done it manually once and proven that it works with the vessel that you designed. It's purely non-visual, like the ship won't literally be flying back and forth. It will just take the time that it took you to do the mission. So let's say 3 days. I don't know how long in Kerbal hours it would take to go back and forth between the Mun and Minmus. So let's say, for example's sake, 3 days. Then every 3 days, you get that amount of lithium added to your Mun colony's resources. And I guess the amount of fuel required to run that mission will get subtracted from your colony's fuel reserves. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So that's going to be really exciting. Obviously, that's a very basic mission, right? Mun and Minmus. But it's going to be much more interesting when it's things like an Eeloo colony, dependent on things from potentially Moho. Very, very extreme example there, how that's going to work. So it's all very exciting, and, you know, we don't know what else the colonies will require. So, for example, that automated ship going back and forth, it's not realistic that it will just do that forever for 1,000 years, right? Because eventually components will degrade, seals will deteriorate. So will the ship only be good for like a year? Then you've got to send a replacement up, or, you know, spend some amount of, I don't think funds and credits are ever going to be in the game, but spend science points or resources on repairing things. I don't know, it's going to be interesting. And I'm sure modders will come up with even more things to manage. So, for example, life support. You've got to keep sending crew resupply missions from Kerbin, you know, water, food, etc., etc. I don't think that's ever going to be part of the stock game. I think Nate himself has said that that's a bit too extreme for the newer players to have to manage so many things, and obviously a mission like this. Okay, Jebediah has had an iPad for this mission, but he's been stuck in that command pod. He's only got out twice. Once 35 years into the mission, just to have a little look at Jool while in orbit, and once to actually plant the flag on Eeloo. And it's actually now been nearly 90 years. So I'm not sure why earlier in the video I said, oh, it's going to be like 50 years. I obviously just completely forgot how long it took me to do this. I only did this yesterday as well. Like, I did the mission and recorded the footage and then edited it all down in Vegas Pro. And then today I sat down just to talk over the footage that I'd edited together. So I don't know. So it's not been that much time. So I'm surprised that I'd forgotten so much. But regardless, yes, anyway, going back to KSP2's future, I'm very, very excited for the colonies update. I think that's going to really, really, really differentiate KSP2 from KSP1. Because at the moment, a lot of people are saying they now prefer KSP2 because the things that have been added with exploration mode has made it a game, made it fun. The missions are much, much cooler. I'm going to say they're cooler objectively than the missions in KSP1, because the missions in KSP1, I'm sorry, I love KSP1, but the missions sucked. The missions in this game are much, much more fun. When I say missions, by the way, I'm talking about the ones that are assigned to you by mission control. Much, much better in KSP2. But KSP2 ultimately is still the same game as KSP1, right? You're just exploring the solar system. Yes, there's now a sort of quasi-story mode and more monuments to explore, but it's still the same kind of game. Colonies, I think, are going to change that. It's going to vastly differentiate the two, and it's going to make KSP2 ultimately a very different game from what KSP1 is and was. But what do you think? Are you excited? Which one are you most excited for? Multiplayer, Interstellar, Colonies, or all of the above? Let me know in the comments down below. But as you can see, we're planning our final encounter with Kerbin. This is not going to be a gravity assist. This is going to be our final capture. And look at that line shape, that shape of our orbit going past Kerbin. It's this nice horseshoe shape. We want it to be as curved as possible because that means the delta V required to circularize, and therefore the amount of heating we're going to have to withstand on re-entry, is going to be as low as possible. We can actually, I think we've got enough fuel to circularize. Look at that. We have enough fuel to circularize on engine power. But you know what? That's no fun. And we will still need to do some re-entry at some point to slow down because we haven't got enough delta V to reach low Kerbin orbit under engines. So I thought, hey, let's just go straight in and see what happens. So here we go. We have a periapsis of 23 kilometers, which is rather low, to be honest. Let's see how we stand up to re-entry. I was very I was very nervous at this point, so I decided to do a retrograde burn off all of our remaining fuel and decelerate, and here we go. Here come those temperature gauges. Doing well so far, but we are still fairly high. Oh, we've lost some. The sacrificial heat shield has begun sacrificing itself for Jebediah Kerman and his trusty iPad. Here we go. I decided to initiate a bit of spin, see if this would slow down the effects of heating, but I'm really not sure it did anything. Oh, there we go. We've lost more of our ablative heat shield. Oh, and there we go. Boom. Now we're in a spin because we've got an asymmetrical profile. I tried to put myself retrograde because that swivel engine has a really, really high heat tolerance. It was the sole survivor of the latest explosion, but sadly was not to be. So now I crossed my fingers and prayed, and oh, there goes that temperature gauge. Oh, and I made a frantic quick save there as we passed through the thermal event. I swear that was legitimate. I was so stoked. Actually, I'm not gonna lie, this was the second attempt at re-entry. The first attempt, I guess I wasn't quite so lucky and the command pod did overheat and explode, but it was about that point I was like, oh, I bet if I just did a quick load and tried again, maybe RNG would help me survive a bit, and it turns out it did. So there you go. That was the scary part of the mission. But as you can see, it is all done. We are now descending under parachute over a nice, safe-looking mountain range. Another cheeky little quick save there because I was very paranoid about something going corrupt and I'd lose everything. But as you can see, we have now touched down. The vessel is recoverable, but of course, we are not done yet. Yes, my space agency does its second ever crew EVA. I was about to say spacewalk, but I guess we're not. The spacesuit wasn't really needed here. Anyway, enough dilly-dally. Let's recover the vessel and go back to mission control. As you can see, we did an EVA, so we got 25 science points there, which means in total, we now have 6,935 science points, which is a lot for our first launch. We can actually, as you can see, unlock the entire first tier of the tech tree, and we can get a decent way through the second tier as well. If we wanted to, we could have even got to tier 3 by just unlocking the top level, but I just wanted to see how far I could get in just tier 2. So this is it. This screen here and that screen there. That's how far along the tech tree you can get on your first launch if you just go to ELU. And who knows, I may well have missed some research opportunities at some point, so maybe you can do better. Go on my subreddit or something, tweet at me. How many science points can you get in your first mission? I guess I could do a repeat of my grand tour where I go to every single celestial body in the game that I did in KSP1. You could definitely do that with just the first tier. Obviously you can't do a landing, but you can visit every single sphere of influence. Maybe that's enough. Granted, about half of the total science we got was from that ELU surface samples. Maybe you can squeeze enough out for a cheeky surface landing somewhere along the way. Who knows? But that's an adventure for another time. There's 2 more adventures on screen, 2 videos from my channel if they look interesting to you. And of course, big thank you to the names on the left. They are, of course, my Patreon supporters and my YouTube channel members who will make all of this content possible. And that's it. Goodbye.